AITA for refusing to pay for my sister's child's medical bills. So I, 28M, have a sister, Emily, 32F, who has a 4-year-old son, James. Emily and I have never really had the closest relationship, but we get along, at least on the surface. I'm not the type to call her every week or ask her how things are going, but we hang out at family events, and it's mostly cordial. However, recently, things between us have been getting more strained, and now I'm questioning if I did the right thing. A few months ago, James was diagnosed with a medical condition. It's not a super rare disease, but it's one that requires continuous treatment and monitoring. My sister has been very open about the diagnosis, posting on social media about it, and talking to family members about how difficult it has been. I totally get that it's a tough situation, and I feel for her. I know that no one expects a child to be sick, and the emotional toll on any parent must be horrible. The financial side of things, however, has been much more complicated. Emily and her husband, Tom, aren't exactly in the best financial position. They both work full-time, but they don't make a ton of money. When James' diagnosis came in, Emily started talking about how expensive the treatments and medical care were. It's not something that is easily covered by insurance, and I'm sure you can imagine how quickly medical bills can add up. A few weeks ago, Emily called me and asked if I could help pay for some of the medical expenses. She explained how they were struggling and how they couldn't afford the copays, medications, and the ongoing tests that James would need. She made it clear that she didn't expect me to pay for everything, but was hoping I could at least help out with some of it. Now, I want to say up front that I do have the financial means to help. I'm doing well in my career, and I've got savings set aside. I'm not struggling in the slightest. But here's where things get complicated. I've always believed that people need to take responsibility for their own lives, and part of that means planning for the unexpected, including medical emergencies. I'm not saying it's easy, but life can be unpredictable, and I feel like it's important to have a safety net in place. I've also been somewhat frustrated with the way Emily and Tom have handled their finances in general. It's not my place to tell them how to live, but they've always had a bit of a live-for-today attitude. They go on vacations they can't really afford, buy things they don't need, and tend to put off planning for the future. I'm not trying to judge them too harshly for it, but I've always felt that they didn't take financial responsibility as seriously as they should. I told Emily that I couldn't help. I was very firm with my decision, even though I know she was upset. I told her that I understood how hard things were, but I didn't feel like it was my responsibility to step in and pay for the medical costs. I suggested that she and Tom should look into other options, like taking out a loan or speaking to a social worker who could help them with financial assistance. I even suggested they try a crowdfunding campaign if they needed to raise money. Emily wasn't happy. She argued that I was being cold and unsympathetic, especially since I have the means to help. She said that as family, I should want to support her and my nephew in this difficult time. She told me that I was turning my back on her when she needed me the most, and that really stung. I honestly didn't expect her to react that way, but I felt like I was doing the right thing. A few days later, I received a call from my parents, who were both very upset with me. They said that I was being selfish and heartless. My mom said I should have helped because family helps family, and my dad said that it's just the right thing to do. They were very disappointed in me, and that made me feel even worse. I don't want to be the bad guy, but I also don't think it's fair for me to bail them out when they haven't made the best financial decisions in the past. At this point, I'm really second-guessing myself. I don't want to lose my relationship with my sister or my parents, but I also don't want to be taken advantage of. I understand that James' medical expenses are overwhelming, but I don't think it's my responsibility to shoulder the burden, especially when it feels like Emily and Tom haven't planned ahead for situations like this. I know that this situation is very emotional, and I truly feel for my nephew. But I just can't help but feel like I'm being asked to fix something that should have been better managed. My decision hasn't just affected Emily and me. It's caused a rift with my parents, and now they're pressuring me to reconsider. I'm stuck between doing what I feel is right and keeping the peace with my family. So, AITA for refusing to pay for my sister's child's medical bills? If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more awesome videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. Thanks for your support. AITA for calling out my sister for ruining my relationship with my parents. I, 28F, have a sister, Rachel, 26F, who I've always had a somewhat complicated relationship with. Growing up, it was never easy between us, but I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that Rachel was always the golden child. She could do no wrong in our parents' eyes, and no matter what I did, I was often compared to her in every way possible. It's not that I hated her for it. There were moments when I tried to make peace with our differences, but I've always felt that the dynamic in our family has been, well, skewed. When Rachel and I were younger, our parents would always tell me I wasn't as talented or driven as her. This stuck with me for a long time. I eventually distanced myself from our parents and started carving out my own path. It wasn't that I didn't love them, but every conversation we had felt like it was filled with comparisons and subtle criticisms. So, I found my own friends and hobbies that allowed me to feel validated without constantly living in Rachel's shadow. As we grew older, things didn't get much better. I went to college in a different city, got my first job, and eventually settled into a routine where I could focus on my own goals. Meanwhile, Rachel stayed close to home, constantly under the spotlight, whether it was for her career, her relationship, or her social life. I would only see my parents a few times a year, and when I did, it always felt like Rachel's accomplishments were the highlight of the visit. The real issue started when Rachel got engaged to her now husband, James. At first, it was a small, intimate family affair, but as the wedding planning picked up, Rachel seemed to want everyone to revolve around her. I tried to be supportive, but I wasn't thrilled about the constant pressure to participate in her plans, whether it was attending events or spending endless hours discussing wedding details. One day, Rachel asked me to be her maid of honor. At first, I was flattered, but then the demands started piling on. I had to take time off work to fly in for dress fittings, attend multiple bridal showers, and be at every pre-wedding event. I didn't have a problem with the commitment, but the more I got involved, the more I noticed a pattern. Rachel was becoming more demanding and critical. If I didn't do something exactly the way she wanted, she would either guilt-trip me or make snide remarks about how she could always count on me to mess things up. It felt like she was treating me like an extension of her wedding, not as a person in my own right. But things really took a turn during the rehearsal dinner. I had spent the entire week before the wedding running around for Rachel's last-minute requests, and I was exhausted. I hadn't had time to catch up with old friends or even relax. At the rehearsal dinner, I barely had a chance to sit down before Rachel pulled me aside and demanded I help with some last-minute changes to the seating arrangements. To make matters worse, she started criticizing how I looked, saying I didn't look put together enough for the occasion. The comments were offhand and cruel, and I could feel my frustration building. After years of feeling like I was her backup, her assistant, or her emotional support, I was done. I told her I needed a break and walked away from the dinner early. I went back to my hotel, changed into something comfortable, and spent the evening alone. The next morning, I was bombarded with texts and calls from Rachel, our parents, and even a few of the bridesmaids asking where I had gone. Rachel was furious. She sent me a message saying that I had ruined the night for her and that I was being selfish and ungrateful for not being there when she needed me most. I tried to explain that I'd been running myself ragged for days and that I just needed some space, but Rachel wasn't having it. She accused me of making everything about me and said that if I couldn't get over myself for one night, I should just leave the wedding altogether. That hit me like a ton of bricks. This was supposed to be about celebrating her, but I wasn't even allowed to take a breather without it becoming my fault. I was so hurt by her words, but I still showed up for the wedding because I didn't want to make a scene. The wedding itself wasn't much better. Rachel had clearly told everyone about my bad behavior, and I could feel the cold stares from the family and bridal party. The rest of the evening was a blur of awkward silences and forced smiles, with Rachel and our parents making sure to remind me that I was lucky to be a part of this special day. The whole experience was emotionally draining, and I left feeling more disconnected than ever from my family. In the weeks that followed, I tried to reach out to my parents and explain my side of things. I told them that I had been feeling undervalued and mistreated by Rachel, and that I wasn't happy with how everything had unfolded. They were unsympathetic, mostly defending Rachel and saying that I should have just sucked it up for the sake of the wedding. My mom even said that I needed to grow up and that weddings were stressful for everyone. I felt like I was being gaslit into believing that my feelings didn't matter. I finally hit a breaking point when I overheard a conversation between my mom and dad about how disappointing it was that I had caused so much drama at Rachel's wedding. They said that I needed to stop making everything about me and that I should be more supportive of Rachel, who had been through so much already. The irony of that statement didn't escape me. They were blaming me for being upset after being treated like a second-class citizen for years, while Rachel got to have everything her way. Now, I'm at a crossroads. I'm not sure how to move forward with my family. I've been distant from Rachel and our parents ever since the wedding, and I'm honestly not sure if I even want to repair those relationships. I feel like I'm constantly giving, and they never acknowledge my needs or feelings. I'm not sure if I'm just being overly sensitive or if I really am in the wrong here. My friends have been supportive, but I'm starting to feel guilty about not being there for Rachel when she needed me most. So, AITA for calling out my sister and my parents for their treatment of me. AITA for refusing to let my friend move into my house after she burned bridges with all her other friends. So I, 29M, have a close-knit group of friends. We've been friends for years, and while we're not all super tight with each other, there's a core group of about 5 of us that regularly hang out. One of these friends is Rachel, 28F, and she's someone I've known for almost a decade. We've always gotten along well enough, but recently, things have gotten a little complicated. Rachel has always been someone who's a bit impulsive. She tends to burn bridges with people when things don't go her way, and it's been a pattern we've all noticed over the years. However, it's never been enough for me to distance myself from her until recently. She's had a string of bad relationships, often getting into them very quickly and then abruptly breaking up with her partners over small disagreements. I've seen her do this with several people in her life, but it's always been more of a her problem than a me problem. A few months ago, Rachel found herself in a messy situation with her latest boyfriend, Ethan, 30M. They had been dating for almost a year when they had a huge falling out over something relatively minor. She claimed that Ethan didn't want to spend enough time with her, and he felt like she was too demanding and controlling. The breakup was messy, with a lot of drama between the two of them, and Rachel quickly cut ties with him. I was kind of relieved for her, to be honest, because the relationship seemed toxic, but that's where things started to get weird. Rachel didn't just break up with Ethan. She also started distancing herself from all of her friends who didn't take her side completely. She was upset that none of us had been loyal enough to really go after Ethan, even though most of us, including me, thought that both of them had their issues and needed to work on themselves. Rachel didn't take too kindly to that response and started getting angry at anyone who didn't immediately agree with her. She started ghosting some of our friends who tried to remain neutral or who suggested that she might be part of the problem. Things escalated quickly, and before long, she had cut ties with pretty much everyone except for me. I've always tried to stay out of drama, but Rachel is someone I've been close to for a long time, and I've never been the type to leave a friend in need. She started reaching out to me more and more, pouring out her frustrations about how everyone else had abandoned her. She would call me crying, ranting about how she felt betrayed and how lonely she was. I tried to listen and support her without taking sides, but the more I heard, the more I started to notice a pattern in her behavior. It wasn't just Ethan. Rachel had been isolating herself from everyone for years, and now she was doing the same thing with all of us. Then things took a turn. A few weeks ago, Rachel called me and asked if she could move in with me. She had nowhere else to go, she said, and her apartment lease was up soon. She had tried reaching out to a few of the other friends she had alienated, but no one was willing to take her in, and she had no family nearby. At first, I was taken aback. I wasn't expecting her to ask, and I wasn't sure how I felt about the idea. I've always been the kind of person who values my space and my peace of mind, and living with someone, especially someone who tends to bring drama into my life, seemed like a recipe for disaster. I told her that I'd think about it, but I needed some time to consider it. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that letting Rachel move in might not be the best choice. She has a history of burning bridges with people, and I didn't want to be her last resort when all her other options had dried up. I also started to feel like I was enabling her behavior by stepping in and offering her a place to stay after she'd pushed everyone else away. I didn't want to be her safety net every time she screwed up, especially when she hadn't taken responsibility for her part in any of the situations. Eventually, I called her and explained that I wasn't comfortable with the idea of her moving in. I told her that I valued our friendship, but living together would be too much, and I didn't think it was a healthy dynamic for either of us. I suggested that she try finding a temporary place to stay or even look into getting therapy to help with some of the issues she was dealing with. I also offered to help her look for apartments or roommates, but I made it clear that I wasn't going to let her move in with me. Rachel was absolutely furious. She called me selfish, saying that I was abandoning her when she needed me most. She accused me of being a terrible friend and told me that I didn't really care about her well-being. She also said that I was just afraid of dealing with her problems and that if I was really her friend, I'd do whatever it took to help her. She cried over the phone, but I stuck to my decision. Since then, Rachel has barely spoken to me. She's also posted some passive-aggressive things on social media, accusing people of abandoning her and saying that she's been left to fend for herself. A few of our mutual friends have reached out to me, asking if I'm sure I made the right decision. They've said that Rachel is in a tough spot, and maybe I should have stepped up to help her, but I still feel like I did the right thing. I don't want to be a part of a cycle where I constantly bail her out when she's burned all her other bridges. I've tried to stay firm in my decision, but I can't help but wonder if I'm being too harsh. I know that Rachel is in a difficult place, but I also know that she has a pattern of toxic behavior, and I don't want to be dragged into it. I'm torn between wanting to be a good friend and not wanting to enable her behavior any longer. So, AITA for refusing to let my friend move into my house after she burned bridges with all her other friends. AITA for cutting off my best friend after she disrespected my partner multiple times. I, 29F, have been best friends with Emily, 30F, for almost 15 years. We met in high school, and since then, we've been inseparable. Over the years, she has been my go-to person for everything: breakups, career decisions, family drama, you name it. We've always had each other's backs, and I've always considered her to be my sister in everything but blood. I've always been there for her through thick and thin, and I thought she'd be there for me the same way. About a year ago, I started dating my now partner, Jason, 31M. He's kind, funny, and really just a good guy. We hit it off immediately, and I couldn't be happier. Jason and I complement each other so well, and he makes me feel loved and appreciated in ways I hadn't realized I was missing. Of course, I introduced him to Emily early on because she's my best friend, and I wanted her to get to know him. At first, everything seemed fine. Emily seemed to like him well enough, but soon, little comments started slipping out. At first, it was small things like, "I don't know why you're with him, he's not your usual type," or, "You sure he's not a little too old for you?" I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe she was just being protective of me, as she had been with all my previous relationships. But after a while, these comments became more frequent, and they started to get under my skin. One evening, I had invited Emily and Jason over for dinner. I thought it would be a nice, casual hangout, but Emily made the night incredibly uncomfortable. We were all sitting at the table when Emily casually mentioned, I just don't see what's so special about him. He's not very exciting. I mean, he's a bit dull compared to the guys you usually date." Jason, who is usually laid back and doesn't engage in conflict, looked a bit hurt. He didn't say anything in the moment, but I could tell it affected him. I was annoyed but tried to keep things light by brushing it off, saying, "Well, I like him for who he is." But Emily just shrugged and continued eating as if nothing had happened. The next time we all hung out, things didn't get any better. Emily started to make little digs at Jason's job, claiming that his profession, he's in finance, was boring and that he probably had no hobbies outside of work. She asked him what his real interests were and made him feel like his career wasn't something worth discussing. I could tell Jason was uncomfortable, but he tried to keep the conversation going, even making jokes to lighten the mood. I tried to intervene at one point, saying, "Emily, can we talk about something else?" But she just laughed it off, saying, "I'm just kidding. You don't have to take it so seriously." It wasn't just the comments about Jason's job. Emily started to criticize how Jason and I interacted. She would say things like, "Wow, You guys really don't seem that close. Are you sure this is a real relationship? Or it seems like you're doing all the work to keep this relationship going, don't you think? These comments weren't just hurtful, they were downright mean. Jason would always try to brush it off, but I could see him getting frustrated. Things escalated even further when Emily invited us to a party she was hosting. Jason and I had been together for a few months by that point, and we were in a really good place. When we arrived, everything seemed fine at first, but as the night went on, Emily started making sarcastic comments about how I was clinging to Jason and how boring it was to hang out with a couple. At one point, she even made a remark in front of the group, saying, "Wow, I guess you've really got him wrapped around your finger, huh?" Jason, who had already been irritated by her comments in the past, snapped. He said, "I don't appreciate the way you keep putting me down, Emily. I've tried to be polite about it, but it's started to feel like you have a problem with me." Emily was shocked, but she didn't back down. She tried to laugh it off, saying, "Oh, calm down. It's just a joke," but Jason wasn't having it. I could feel the tension rising, and I could tell Emily wasn't taking him seriously. After that, things started to spiral. Emily started distancing herself from us, not returning my calls or texts as much. When she did respond, it was short and dismissive. I tried to talk to her about it, asking if something was wrong, but she kept deflecting, saying, "Nothing's wrong. Maybe you're just overreacting." It was frustrating because I had no idea where this animosity was coming from. A few weeks ago, I finally reached my breaking point. Emily made a rude comment about Jason's family when we were all together for a birthday dinner. She said, "I don't know how you deal with his family. They seem really stiff. Are you sure you want to be around that for the rest of your life?" I was done. I told her, "Enough. This has gone too far. You've disrespected him time and time again, and I've had enough. You made it clear you don't like him, so I don't want to hear any more comments like that." Emily was shocked. She said, "I'm just trying to look out for you. I don't think he's good for you. I'm your best friend. I'm just being honest." But I was firm. I told her that it was disrespectful and that if she couldn't respect my relationship, then we couldn't be friends anymore. I told her I wouldn't tolerate her belittling Jason, and if she couldn't be supportive, then she didn't need to be in my life. Since then, Emily hasn't reached out to me. I've received some angry messages from her, accusing me of choosing him over her and calling me weak for letting a man dictate who I can be friends with. My other friends are split on the situation. Some say I did the right thing by standing up for my partner, but others feel like I was too harsh and should have tried to talk to Emily more before cutting her off completely. I'm really torn. Emily and I have been friends for so long, but I feel like she's never respected my boundaries or my relationship. I love Jason, and I don't want to be in a relationship where I have to choose between him and my friends. But at the same time, I feel like I've lost someone who's been a huge part of my life for so long. So, AITA for cutting her off after all the disrespect. AITA for telling my sister I won't babysit her kids anymore after she disrespected my boundaries. I, 30F, have an older sister, Lana, 35F, and we've always had a somewhat complicated relationship. We're not enemies, but we're not super close either. Growing up, I often felt like I was the one who had to play mediator between Lana and our parents, as she could be a bit rebellious and hot-headed. As we've gotten older, I've kept my distance, but we've remained civil. Lana got married a few years ago and has 2 kids, Sophia, 5F, and Ethan, 3M. I have a full-time job, and while I don't have kids myself, I try to be a supportive aunt. A few months ago, Lana reached out to me and asked if I could help her out with babysitting for a few hours while she and her husband went on a date night. I had no problem with it and agreed to watch the kids, especially since they're my niece and nephew, and I do love them. However, what started as a one-off favor has turned into something far more complicated. At first, it was just once every couple of weeks, and I didn't mind at all. I'd pick the kids up from school or daycare, feed them dinner, and put them to bed, which felt like an easy way to help out. The kids were always excited to see me, and I'd usually get them a small treat or play a game before bedtime, which I thought was fun for all of us. I honestly didn't think much of it. Lana would always thank me and sometimes even offer to pay me, though I always declined. It was family, and I was happy to help. But over time, things started to change. Lana began asking me to watch the kids more and more frequently. It wasn't just date nights anymore. It was also for things like last-minute errands, unexpected work commitments, or when she just wanted a break. At first, I didn't want to say no because I wanted to be supportive. But then I noticed that I was watching the kids 3 or 4 times a week, sometimes with no prior warning or planning. One evening, I had a long, exhausting day at work and was looking forward to some time to relax. I had planned to go out with some friends to dinner and then catch up on a Netflix show I had been binge-watching. Lana called me about 2 hours before I was supposed to leave, asking if I could watch Sophia and Ethan because she had an emergency and needed to run to the store. I was already mentally exhausted and had a full evening planned, so I told her I wasn't available. That's when the tension started. Lana didn't take it well. She said she was really relying on me, and I was being selfish. She reminded me of how much I had helped in the past, and I could hear her getting frustrated on the other end of the phone. I tried to explain that I needed to have some boundaries, that I couldn't just drop everything every time she needed a favor. She didn't seem to understand, and I felt bad for saying no, but I stood firm. The situation only escalated from there. Over the next few weeks, Lana started calling me more frequently, asking for last-minute babysitting, and getting upset when I said no. She began to guilt-trip me, saying things like, "You know how hard it is for me to get a break, and it would mean so much to me if you could just help out." She also started telling me that I was being unreasonable and that I was being a bad aunt, especially since I didn't have kids of my own and didn't understand what it was like to need a break. I started feeling like I couldn't do anything without upsetting her, but I also realized I was sacrificing my own time and energy for her convenience. She never offered to pay me, and when I would occasionally mention that I needed a break too, she would say things like, "Well, you don't have kids, so you don't understand how hard it is." I'm sure there was some truth to what she was saying, but it didn't change the fact that I was getting overwhelmed. The tipping point came about a month ago. I had a work event I had been preparing for weeks. It was a big deal for my career, and I was stressed out about it. The night before the event, Lana called me at 9 p.m. asking if I could come pick up Sophia and Ethan because her husband had to work late. I was already exhausted, and the last thing I wanted to do was take care of 2 small kids when I had a big presentation the next day. I politely told her that I couldn't help this time and explained the importance of my event. Lana didn't take it well. She accused me of not caring about her kids and of being selfish, saying I should be more supportive since she was always there for me. I calmly told her that I had my own commitments and she needed to respect my time. She didn't respond well, and the conversation ended on a tense note. The next day, I was still thinking about it, and I realized that the issue wasn't just about babysitting, it was about boundaries. I had been saying yes to her too much, and she had started to take it for granted. I wasn't being treated like a helpful aunt anymore. I was being treated like a free babysitter. I called Lana and told her that I could no longer babysit as frequently. I explained that while I loved her kids, I needed to have some personal time, and I couldn't keep sacrificing my own life for her convenience. I told her that I would be happy to help occasionally, but not on the regular basis she had come to expect. I also set a clear boundary that I wouldn't be available for last-minute requests unless it was an emergency. Lana didn't take this well. She immediately started crying, accusing me of abandoning her and making her feel like a bad mother. She said I was being unreasonable and that I was choosing work and personal time over my family. I tried to stay calm, but I also stood firm in my decision. After that conversation, things have been pretty tense between us. She hasn't asked me for help since, and while she still talks to me, it's clear that she's upset with me. Now I'm feeling conflicted. I don't want to hurt my sister, but I also need to protect my own time and well-being. I know that she has a lot on her plate, but I don't think it's fair for her to expect me to constantly drop everything to help her. I'm just trying to be a good sister and aunt while maintaining a balance in my own life. So, AITA for telling my sister I won't babysit her kids anymore after she disrespected my boundaries. AITA for telling my sister she's not allowed to stay with me after what happened last time. I, 30F, have a younger sister, Sarah, 27F, who has always been a bit of a wild card. Growing up, she was the rebellious one while I was the responsible, rule-abiding kid. Our parents always seemed to favor Sarah when it came to forgiveness. She would get into trouble whether it was breaking curfew, sneaking out, or failing a class, and they would just overlook it. On the other hand, I was the one who had to follow all the rules, be perfect, and keep everything together. I'm not bitter about it, but it definitely created some tension between us as we got older. In my 20s, I moved to a different city for my job. I kept in touch with Sarah, but our relationship wasn't the same. She was living at home, bouncing from job to job, and occasionally getting involved in toxic relationships that I didn't always approve of. But despite everything, I tried to stay supportive. I'd call her, give her advice, and sometimes even send money when she needed it. A few years ago, Sarah's life seemed to take a turn for the worse. She broke up with a long-term boyfriend, and shortly after that, she lost her job due to poor performance. Around the same time, I had just moved into a new apartment, and Sarah reached out to me, asking if she could crash at my place for a while until she got back on her feet. She promised it would only be for a couple of weeks, and at the time, I wanted to be supportive, so I agreed. Let me tell you, it was a disaster. The first week, everything seemed fine. She was polite, helped around the apartment a little, and even cooked dinner a couple of times. But by week 2, things started to unravel. She stopped looking for jobs and instead spent all her time sleeping in, binge-watching Netflix, and using my things without asking. I noticed that she was eating all of my food, not cleaning up after herself, and leaving her laundry everywhere. When I asked her to be more considerate, she just shrugged it off, saying she was going through a tough time and that I should be more understanding. Things only got worse from there. Sarah started bringing random people to my apartment, including a guy she had just met at a bar. They'd stay up until 3 a.m., playing loud music, and I would have to get up early for work. The first time it happened, I told her to keep it down, but she just ignored me and continued with her behavior. When I confronted her again, she got defensive and accused me of being too uptight and acting like an old lady. Finally, the breaking point came when I came home from work one evening to find Sarah and 2 of her friends completely trashed in my living room, with empty bottles and food wrappers everywhere. My couch had been stained, and my carpet was covered in spills. I was beyond frustrated. I told her that she needed to leave, and I wasn't putting up with it anymore. She got upset, crying and saying that she had nowhere else to go. I told her that it wasn't my problem and that she needed to figure it out. Eventually, I gave her some time to find another place, but the whole situation left a sour taste in my mouth. After a week of her constant texting, asking if she could stay a bit longer or just sleep on the couch, I told her I needed space and didn't want her back in my apartment. I felt guilty, but I also knew that her behavior was unreasonable, and I had set boundaries that she was repeatedly ignoring. It's been about a year since that whole ordeal, and things have been tense between us. She apologized several times, saying that she was in a bad place and that she hadn't been herself. I forgave her, but I still felt hurt and used. Since then, we've kept in touch here and there, but I've been very clear that I can't go through something like that again. Recently, Sarah called me and asked if she could come visit for a week. She said she was having a hard time again and needed some time away from her current living situation. She didn't give me many details, but from the way she sounded, I could tell she was looking for a place to stay again. I immediately felt uneasy, but I didn't want to say no outright. I asked her if she was in a stable position now and whether she had a plan to support herself while she was here. She told me that she had a temporary job and that everything was fine. After hanging up, I started thinking about the past. I thought about how she took advantage of my generosity and how it affected me. I knew that saying yes might put me in a difficult position again, and I didn't want to deal with that level of stress. I also knew that I couldn't risk having the same situation happen all over again. So, I called her back and told her that I didn't feel comfortable with her staying at my place again. I explained that after the last time, I had realized I needed to prioritize my peace of mind and my space. I told her that I loved her, but I couldn't risk having my boundaries pushed again. She didn't take it well. She immediately got upset, saying that I was being selfish and that I was abandoning her when she needed me most. She called me heartless and said I was acting like a stranger to her. We've barely spoken since. She sent me a few more angry texts saying that she couldn't believe I would do this to her after everything she had gone through. I've tried to explain that it's not about not wanting to help her, but rather about protecting myself from being taken advantage of again, but she hasn't responded positively. I'm now getting messages from our parents who think I'm being too harsh and that family should help each other out. My mom even said I should be more understanding and that Sarah really needs support. I know I'm not in the wrong for setting boundaries, but part of me feels guilty. I don't want to cut her off entirely, but I also don't want to go back to the same toxic situation. I feel like I'm stuck between wanting to be a good sister and wanting to protect my own mental health. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister stay with me again after everything that happened last time. AITA for refusing to let my friend borrow money after she spent it all on luxury items. So I, 27M, have a friend named Tessa, 26F, who I've known for about 6 years now. We met in college, and for the most part, we've had a pretty solid friendship. I've always considered her to be one of my closest friends, although we've never been without our differences. The thing about Tessa is that she's always been someone who has a very particular view of the world. She likes luxury, whether it's designer clothing, gadgets, or dining experiences, and she isn't shy about it. But over time, I started to realize that Tessa had developed a habit of living beyond her means and often expected her friends to help her when things got tight. I'm not talking about an occasional loan or a small favor. I mean, she constantly borrows money from people, me included, and it's starting to feel like it's not a one-time thing. For the past year or so, Tessa has been going through a rough patch financially. She lost her job at the beginning of the pandemic, and while she eventually landed another one, it doesn't pay nearly as well as her previous job. She's been really struggling to make ends meet, and I understand that. I also know that the world has been tough on a lot of people in terms of employment and wages, so I've been sympathetic. However, Tessa has an ongoing pattern of spending more than she can afford. This came to a head a few months ago when she asked me for a loan of $1,500. I was hesitant because I knew she had a tendency to spend money on things that weren't necessary. When I asked her why she needed so much, she told me it was for emergency expenses and things she couldn't put off any longer. Given how close we were, I wanted to help her out, but I also had some reservations. I knew Tessa's lifestyle. She often bought luxury handbags, expensive beauty treatments, and went on lavish vacations that she couldn't afford. I had a hard time reconciling how emergency her financial situation was when I saw all of this happening. I did, however, decide to lend her the money. I had the extra funds, and I figured I'd rather help her now than see her go through something that might have serious consequences. But I made it clear that I would need the money back within 6 months. She promised me she would pay me back as soon as she could, and everything seemed fine. We agreed that she'd start paying me back in installments, which felt like a reasonable arrangement at the time. A month went by, and I didn't hear from her. I tried reaching out a couple of times, just to check in on how things were going, but there was no response. At first, I figured she was just busy or overwhelmed by her own stress, but then I started to notice things that made me uncomfortable. On social media, Tessa posted about a weekend getaway to a luxury resort, complete with spa treatments, expensive dinners, and designer clothes she'd bought for the trip. She had also posted pictures of herself with new accessories, including a handbag I recognized as one of the most expensive brands out there. That's when I started to feel really frustrated. She had asked me for money because of emergency expenses, but it seemed like she had been spending a significant amount of money on things that weren't essential. This was all while she had promised me she would pay me back as soon as possible. I'll admit, I felt a little betrayed. I hadn't seen any effort from her to even check in on when she could start paying me back, and instead, she was living the same high-end lifestyle she always had. 2 months later, I finally had enough and called her out. I asked her directly why she was posting about these luxury items and vacations while still owing me money. I explained that it was hard for me to understand how she could afford these things while not even attempting to pay back the loan. I told her that I felt uncomfortable and a bit disrespected by her actions. Tessa got defensive right away. She told me that the resort vacation had already been planned before she asked me for the loan and that she had paid for it with money she had saved up before losing her job. She also said that she didn't need to explain how she spent her money to anyone, especially me. She added that I was being ungrateful for even questioning her, as she was going through a lot of personal stress and needed some relief. I was still upset, but I tried to remain calm and explain how it felt like she wasn't taking her debt to me seriously. She then accused me of being judgmental, saying that I had no right to tell her how to spend her money. She told me that it was none of my business how she lived her life, and that if I was so concerned about getting paid back, I should find a way to make her do it. She said she'd pay me back when she could, but in the meantime, I was being too harsh by bringing up these issues. After that conversation, I felt really hurt. It seemed like she wasn't taking responsibility for her financial actions and wasn't prioritizing paying me back. I started to rethink everything. Yes, I wanted to help her, but I also didn't want to feel like a bank. It felt like she was treating me as a source of money whenever she needed it, without any real commitment to repaying or respecting my boundaries. I haven't reached out to her since that argument. I've been debating whether I should just write off the loan as a lost cause, but I also don't want to be a pushover. I'm frustrated that she hasn't even tried to pay me back or make any real effort. I'm also conflicted because I do care about Tessa as a friend, but I feel like I've been taken advantage of. I've been wrestling with the idea that maybe I shouldn't have lent her the money in the first place. I can't help but feel like she's more concerned with her luxury lifestyle than with our friendship. Now, I'm wondering if I'm being too hard on her. Should I have been more understanding about her situation, or am I justified in feeling betrayed and frustrated? Am I wrong for cutting her off and refusing to let her borrow any more money, even though I'm in a position to help? So, AITA for refusing to let my friend borrow money after she spent it all on luxury items? AITA for refusing to give my sister the money she wants after she drained my savings? I, 32F, have a younger sister, Amanda, 28F, who I've always had a complicated relationship with. Growing up, we were pretty close, but as we got older, things started to shift. While I was focused on my career and building a stable life, Amanda always seemed to take a more live-in-the-moment approach. She would often make impulsive decisions and rely on others to help her get out of the messes she created. It didn't bother me at first because we're family, and I wanted to support her. But over time, I started feeling like I was being taken advantage of. The first instance of this happened a few years ago when Amanda had just graduated college. She had a degree in communications but struggled to find a job at her field. Instead of being proactive about it, she spent months lounging at home, applying for random jobs that had nothing to do with her degree. She'd call me up almost every week, complaining about how unlucky she was and how her life was going nowhere. I tried to help by offering advice, but I couldn't force her to take action. Then one day, she came to me in tears, saying she was about to be evicted because she couldn't pay rent. At that point, I was doing well financially, so I offered to help her out. I didn't think twice about giving her the money because I figured it would be a one-time thing and she'd get her act together. Unfortunately, it didn't stop there. A few months later, Amanda found herself in another financial crisis. This time, she had overspent on her credit cards and couldn't pay the bills. Again, she came to me asking for help. By this point, I was starting to feel frustrated, but I couldn't just leave her hanging, so I gave her more money. She promised me she'd pay me back as soon as she got her finances in order, but that never happened. The money I gave her was never returned, and to be honest, I didn't expect it at this point. I told myself I was helping my sister, and family is supposed to support each other, right? Fast forward to about a year ago, and Amanda's situation had only gotten worse. She still wasn't working in a stable job, constantly jumping from one short-term gig to another, never really committing to anything long-term. She kept asking for money, and I kept giving it, though it was starting to affect my own savings. I was starting to feel resentful, but I kept telling myself she's my sister, and I should be there for her. However, after the last time I gave her money, I reached my breaking point. Amanda had been laid off from another temp job, and she came to me, saying she needed money for rent again. At this point, I was getting close to a major purchase I had been saving for, buying a house, and I was on a tight budget. I knew I couldn't just keep giving her money without it affecting my own future. So, for the first time, I told her I couldn't help her. I explained that I had my own financial goals, and I needed to prioritize those. She didn't take it well. Amanda started texting me constantly, calling me selfish, saying that I didn't care about her and that I was being mean for not helping. She even accused me of being privileged and not understanding what it was like to struggle. I stood my ground, and after a few days of being bombarded with angry messages, she stopped texting me. I thought maybe she'd cool down and realize that I was doing this for her own good, to encourage her to be more responsible, but I was wrong. Last week, Amanda called me, saying she had a huge emergency. Apparently, she had gotten herself into even more debt, and now her car had broken down. She said she couldn't afford to fix it and needed a few $1,000s to get it repaired. This was the last straw for me. I've spent the past few days thinking about it, and I've realized that this cycle of constant handouts is only enabling her bad habits. She doesn't seem to be learning any lessons from the help I've given her. I told Amanda that I couldn't give her any more money and that I wasn't going to continue enabling her. I told her that I wanted her to learn how to handle her own finances and deal with her problems on her own. She was devastated and tried to guilt-trip me, saying things like, "How can you not help me when I've always been there for you? You're the only family I have left." I tried to stay firm, but I could tell she was really upset, and it made me feel bad. At the same time, I know that this is the best thing for both of us. Since then, she hasn't spoken to me. Our parents are upset with me, too, because they think I should be doing more for Amanda. They keep telling me that family is supposed to help each other, and they don't understand why I'm refusing. They keep bringing up the times I've been helped by them and say that I should be more supportive, but I feel like they're missing the point. I'm not abandoning her. I'm just not enabling her behavior anymore. If I keep giving her money, she'll never learn how to be responsible. My friends have been more supportive, saying I did the right thing by setting boundaries and not letting her walk all over me. But part of me still feels guilty. I feel like I failed as a sister by not helping her in her time of need. I know I'm doing the right thing for my own financial future, but it's hard when your family is upset with you. So, AITA for refusing to give my sister the money she wants after I've already helped her so many times? Am I being too harsh by not giving in this time? Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what could be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for telling my mom I won't attend her birthday party if she invites my estranged brother. I, 29F, have a complicated relationship with my family, particularly with my brother, Evan, 32M. Growing up, we were close, but things started to unravel when we were in our late teens. Evan was always rebellious, and by the time he was 18, he dropped out of high school, started getting into trouble with the law, and eventually became estranged from most of the family. My parents were devastated by his behavior, but they always tried to help him, offering support in ways that I felt were enabling. They gave him money, let him live with them on and off, and constantly bailed him out of sticky situations. Despite their best efforts, Evan continued to make destructive choices that not only affected his own life, but also strained our family dynamics. Over the years, things with Evan only got worse. He was in and out of jail multiple times, was caught up in bad relationships, and his behavior became more erratic. Each time he came back home, he would act like nothing had happened, as if there were no consequences for his actions. My parents kept hoping he'd turn around, but it became clear that he wasn't interested in changing. I tried to distance myself, but it wasn't easy because he was still my brother. I tried to be supportive, but every time I made an effort, it felt like he took advantage of it. Around 3 years ago, after a particularly ugly confrontation, I decided that I could no longer have him in my life. We were both at a family gathering, and Evan started making rude, inappropriate comments to me in front of everyone. When I asked him to stop, he mocked me and became aggressive. I ended up leaving the gathering early, and after that, I told my parents that I didn't want to have any contact with Evan until he took responsibility for his actions and made some real changes. My parents weren't happy with my decision, but they respected it, and I stopped attending family gatherings where I knew Evan would be present. Since then, I've been living my life without much involvement from my family. I see my parents occasionally, and we have a cordial relationship, but Evan is still a huge point of tension. Every time I speak with my mom, she brings up how hard it is for her to not have us both in the same room. But I've always made it clear that I'm not willing to subject myself to his behavior just to make her feel better. She's often told me that I should just get over it and let him back into my life. But I've refused because I don't feel like I owe him anything after all the damage he's caused. Now, fast forward to this year. My mom's 60th birthday is coming up, and she's planning a big family party. She's been hinting for weeks that she really wants all of her children there, and she's made it clear that it would mean the world to her if Evan and I could put our differences aside for a special day. She's even suggested that maybe it's time for me to forgive him and move on from the past. The pressure has been mounting, and I've found myself feeling torn. I'm not heartless, and I understand that my mom wants us to have a happy family reunion. However, I just don't think I can do it. I've spent years working on my own mental health, and having Evan in my life again would feel like taking several steps backward. I still remember the way he treated me at that family gathering, and I've been living a peaceful life without the stress of his toxic behavior. I don't want to go back to that dynamic, especially not for one day, just to placate my mom. Last night, my mom called me to finalize the details for her birthday. She once again asked if I was planning to attend the party, and when I told her that I wasn't comfortable being around Evan, she was very disappointed. She said she didn't understand why I couldn't just let go of the past and come for her. I tried to explain that it's not that simple for me, and I don't want to pretend like everything is okay when it's not. I told her that I'd be happy to celebrate her birthday with her in a more intimate setting, just the two of us or with a small group of people, but I couldn't attend a big family party if Evan was going to be there. My mom became upset and said that it wasn't fair of me to make her choose between her children. She said she shouldn't have to choose, that family is family, and that I should be able to put my differences with Evan aside for one day. She also mentioned that I was being selfish and that I should think about how much it would mean to her to have both of us there. She then added, "You've had so much time to get over it, and you're still holding a grudge. Maybe you're the one who's making it hard to fix the family." That really stung. I tried to explain that it's not about holding a grudge, but rather about my own boundaries and well-being. I told her that while I love her and want her to have a great birthday, I just couldn't pretend everything was fine with Evan. She accused me of being too rigid and said that I was ruining her birthday with my attitude. After the conversation, I felt really conflicted. Part of me feels like I should just let go of my feelings for the sake of my mom's happiness. After all, it's her milestone birthday, and she's not getting any younger. But the other part of me feels like I'm being completely reasonable in protecting myself and not allowing someone who has hurt me repeatedly back into my life, even for one day. I know my mom is hurt by my decision, and I don't want to make her feel like I don't care. But I also don't think it's fair to expect me to let Evan back into my life just to satisfy some unrealistic family ideal. I've been through too much to just sweep everything under the rug for the sake of family unity. So, AITA for telling my mom I won't attend her birthday party if she invites my estranged brother. AITA for refusing to let my friend move in after she lost her job and home. 29F, have a friend, Liz, 28F, who I've known since college. We've always gotten along well, even though we're quite different. I'm the kind of person who likes stability, structure, and long-term planning, whereas Liz is more spontaneous, often making decisions on a whim without thinking too much about the long-term consequences. For the most part, I've been able to look past our differences, and we've always had a great friendship. I've always been there for her whenever she needed advice or someone to vent to. However, things started to get complicated last year. Liz lost her job unexpectedly after the company she worked for went under. At the time, I tried to be supportive, even though I could tell that Liz wasn't putting much effort into finding a new job. Instead of actively job hunting, she spent a lot of time going to parties and traveling. She would always say, "I'll figure it out eventually," but nothing ever seemed to change. When she wasn't out socializing, she was at home, waiting for opportunities to magically fall into her lap. After a few months of this, Liz ran out of money and ended up moving in with her boyfriend at the time. But that relationship ended a few months ago, and Liz found herself without a job, without a boyfriend, and without a place to stay. She reached out to me, asking if she could stay with me for a little while she figured things out. I was hesitant at first because I knew how things had gone the last time she needed help, but I also didn't want to abandon her in her time of need. I agreed to let her stay with me, thinking it would only be temporary. I told her I could offer her a month to stay, and after that, I would need her to start figuring things out on her own. At first, things seemed okay. Liz moved in, and she was respectful of my space. However, as time went on, I started to notice things that bothered me. She didn't seem to be making any real effort to find a job. She would sleep in until noon every day, and when I asked her if she had applied to any positions, she would tell me she was waiting for the right opportunity. She'd spend hours on her phone, scrolling through social media, but rarely did anything productive. Every time I tried to talk to her about being proactive with her job search, she'd brush me off, saying something like, "I just need a little more time, okay?" By the second month of her staying with me, it became clear that Liz had no plans of leaving anytime soon. She wasn't contributing financially, even though she'd told me she would be able to help out with bills once she found a job. My rent was already expensive, and I was struggling to cover everything on my own. I had mentioned to Liz multiple times that I needed help, but she kept making excuses. She would say things like, "I'll pitch you next month," or "I'm just focusing on finding the right job right now." Meanwhile, I was getting frustrated. My own job was demanding, and I had to manage all my finances alone while also supporting Liz. It felt like I was being taken advantage of. I tried to have a serious conversation with her about her plans. I told her that I couldn't keep doing this indefinitely, and she needed to start looking for work more seriously. She promised me that things would change, but they didn't. The job search remained a distant thought in her mind, and instead of focusing on finding work, she seemed to be more focused on hanging out with friends and going to events. At that point, I felt completely drained. I had been asking for her to be more responsible and start contributing to the household, but nothing changed. I even gave her a deadline, saying that by the end of the third month, she needed to either have a job or at least start paying rent, even if it was just a small amount to help out. She agreed, but as the deadline approached, she still hadn't found anything, and she didn't seem any closer to getting her life together. Finally, the fourth month came around, and Liz didn't have a job, nor was she planning to pay rent. She asked if she could stay for another month, saying that things were about to turn around and that she just needed a little more time. This time, I couldn't take it anymore. I told her that I couldn't keep supporting her indefinitely and that she needed to make real changes in her life. I reminded her of the promises she had made to both contribute and find a job. I told her that, unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to extend her stay any longer. Liz got angry. She accused me of being selfish and said I was kicking her out when she needed me most. She said that she didn't have anywhere else to go and that I was being heartless for not helping her in her time of need. I tried to explain that it wasn't about not wanting to help, but that she wasn't making any effort to help herself. She wasn't taking responsibility for her situation and wasn't trying to change anything. She refused to listen and said that I was choosing my own comfort over family. I ended up sticking to my decision, telling her that she needed to leave. I helped her find a few places she could go, and I offered to help her with a few contacts for job leads, but she refused to take them seriously. She moved out a few days later, but since then, she's been distant. She's told mutual friends that I abandoned her and that I never truly cared. I've even heard from our parents, who are upset with me for not being more understanding and for turning my back on her. Now, I feel conflicted. I know I did the right thing by setting boundaries and standing up for my own well-being, but it's hard not to feel guilty when my family and Liz herself are angry at me. I've always tried to be a supportive friend and family member, but I feel like Liz is taking advantage of my kindness. I can't keep sacrificing my own stability to support someone who isn't making any effort to improve their situation. So, AITA for refusing to let my friend move in again after she lost her job and home, especially when she wasn't making any real effort to better her circumstances. AITA for confronting my friend about her constant criticism of my job. I, 28F, have a close friend named Sarah, 29F, and we've known each other since college. We've always gotten along really well, and I've always considered her one of my closest friends. We talk regularly and spend time together on weekends, and I've always been there for her through ups and downs. However, recently I've started feeling a bit frustrated with her behavior, especially when it comes to my job. I work as a project manager for a mid-sized tech company. It's not the most glamorous job, but it pays well, offers decent benefits, and gives me the flexibility I need to have a balanced life. I'm content with it and don't have any plans to make a huge career shift at this point. My job isn't my passion, but it's stable and I'm good at it. Sarah, on the other hand, has always been very career-driven. She's someone who has big ambitions and often talks about wanting to become a CEO of a major company one day. While I admire her ambition, I've always found it a bit exhausting because it feels like she's always measuring everyone else's success against her own dreams and achievements. For the past few months, Sarah has been making constant comments about my job. At first, I brushed it off, but over time, the remarks started to wear on me. It started with her casually saying things like, "I just don't understand why you're not trying to do something bigger with your life. You're so smart, you could easily climb the corporate ladder if you wanted." It wasn't the first time I'd heard something like this from her, but it felt a little more pointed this time. I tried to laugh it off, thinking it was just her being a little too invested in my career, but it didn't stop. As time went on, Sarah started making more direct and critical comments about my job. She would ask questions like, "How do you spend all day just managing people and projects? Doesn't that get boring?" Or she'd say, "I bet you could be making so much more money if you were doing something with more potential. Do you think you'll ever take a risk and go after something bigger?" At first, I assumed she was just trying to motivate me, but the more she said it, the more it started to feel condescending. There was one weekend a few weeks ago when Sarah and I went out for brunch. We were talking about our careers, and I casually mentioned how I had just completed a big project at work. I was proud of how things turned out, and I thought it was worth celebrating. Instead of congratulating me, Sarah immediately started to criticize the project. "It sounds like you're just doing busy work," she said. "Why are you wasting your time on something so mundane? You could be doing something so much more impactful." I was honestly taken aback. I wasn't sure why she thought my job wasn't impactful or valuable, but it really stung. I felt like she was undermining everything I had been working hard for. I tried to explain that I enjoyed the project, and it had real results for the company, but Sarah didn't seem to care. She kept pushing, saying things like, "I just think you're not challenging yourself enough. You should really think about whether you want to still be doing this in 5 years." That was the final straw for me. I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to confront Sarah about how her comments were making me feel. The next time we hung out, I brought it up. I said, "Sarah, I've been meaning to talk to you about something. Lately, it feels like you've been really critical of my job and the work I do. It's been bothering me, and I need you to understand how it makes me feel." At first, Sarah seemed surprised and even a little defensive. "What are you talking about?" she asked. I explained that it wasn't just one or two comments, but the constant way she kept questioning my job and the choices I was making. I told her that it felt like she was dismissing my career and undermining my success. I also mentioned that I had always been there for her, supporting her ambitions and her own career choices, and it felt unfair for her to keep pushing me to be more like her. Sarah's reaction was not what I expected. Instead of apologizing or trying to understand where I was coming from, she became very defensive and said, "I'm just trying to help you realize your potential. You're not taking your career seriously, and I don't want you to end up regretting it." She also said, "You don't get it. I'm just trying to help you aim higher. You could be so much more than just a project manager." I tried to explain again that I was happy with my career, that it worked for me, and that I was proud of the work I was doing. But Sarah didn't seem to hear me. She kept insisting that I was settling for mediocrity. It got to the point where I had to walk away from the conversation. I told her I wasn't going to discuss it any further, and I left. Since then, things have been awkward between us. I haven't really reached out to her much, and when we do talk, it's always strained. It's been a few weeks, and I'm starting to wonder if I was too harsh with her. I've always valued her opinion, and I know she only wants what she thinks is best for me, but I can't help but feel like she's disrespecting my life choices. I don't want to cut her off over this, but I'm starting to question whether we can still be close friends if she doesn't respect my boundaries when it comes to my career. So, AITA for confronting my friend about her constant criticism of my job, AITA for kicking my friend out after she ate my expensive special diet food without asking, I, 30F, have a friend, Emily, 29F, who I've known since college. We've always been really close, though we've had our differences over the years. We've both moved to different cities for work, so we don't see each other all the time, but we keep in touch. Emily has always been a bit more carefree and spontaneous, while I've always been someone who plans things out. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but it sometimes causes friction, especially when it comes to money or personal boundaries. About 6 months ago, I was diagnosed with a food allergy that requires me to follow a very specific and strict diet. It's not the most common allergy, so it's not like I can just eat most store-bought food or rely on others to cook for me. I had to make a lot of changes to my eating habits, which included special ingredients and supplements. These aren't the cheapest foods to buy, and I have to plan my meals carefully to avoid any reactions. Emily and I had been catching up for a few weeks, and she mentioned that she was planning to visit my city for work. Since we hadn't seen each other in months, I was excited and invited her to stay with me for a few days. She agreed, and we made plans. I let her know that because of my food allergies, I had to keep a very strict diet at home, and I wasn't going to be able to share everything with her. She said that was fine, and that she'd be happy to stick to whatever I had in the fridge, just as long as we could hang out and catch up. I assumed that she understood the importance of respecting my dietary needs, especially since we had talked about it before. So, when Emily arrived, everything was great. We spent the first couple of days catching up, going out to eat, and doing some touristy things around the city. I was making sure to plan meals that fit my diet, but I also made sure to buy some snacks and foods that Emily could enjoy since I knew she wasn't on any special diet. We had a good time, but here's where things started to go downhill. On the third day of her visit, I came home from work to find that some of my carefully portioned foods had been eaten. Specifically, my expensive protein powder and some of the specialty grains I had been saving for my meals that week were gone. At first, I thought I might have miscounted or misplaced things, but then I saw Emily sitting on the couch with a full plate of food that was made using the ingredients I'd been saving for my specific meals. I asked her where she had gotten it, and she casually told me that she had used up some of the stuff in the fridge to make herself a quick snack. She seemed completely unbothered, like it wasn't a big deal. I was taken aback, and honestly, I was angry. I asked her why she didn't ask before using my food, especially since I had specifically told her about my dietary restrictions. She just shrugged it off and said, "I didn't think it would be a big deal, it's just food." I calmly explained that it wasn't just any food. It was the only food I had for the week that would work with my allergies, and it wasn't easy or cheap to replace. I told her that she couldn't just use my food without asking, especially when it was something I needed to survive. Emily's attitude changed in an instant. She got defensive and said that I was being overdramatic about it. She told me that I shouldn't be so obsessive about food and that it wasn't like she had eaten all of it, just a little bit. I tried to explain again that it wasn't just about the amount. It was about respecting my boundaries. I don't mind sharing, but I don't think it's too much to ask to check with me before using my food, especially the food I rely on for my health. She rolled her eyes and said that I was being too uptight and that I was ruining the mood by making a big deal out of it. I told her I wasn't trying to ruin anything, but that I needed to stick to my routine for my own well-being. I then asked her to be more careful with what she ate in the future and to replace the items she'd used. She hesitated and then said she didn't have the money to replace it, which frustrated me even more. At that point, I had already been feeling a bit off because of the food issue, and I just snapped. I told her that I didn't think she could stay at my place any longer, and that it would be best if she left. Emily was shocked, and she tried to apologize, saying she didn't mean to upset me. But I told her that it wasn't just about the food. It was about the fact that she had no regard for my boundaries, and I wasn't going to let it slide anymore. She insisted that she was only trying to be casual and that I was overreacting. I didn't want to argue anymore, so I told her to pack her things and leave. She left the next morning, but she hasn't been very communicative since then. I've gotten a few angry texts from her, saying that I was being immature and too rigid about something as simple as food. She also mentioned that I was taking it out on her for something that wasn't her fault. Our mutual friends have also gotten involved, and some of them agree with me that I had every right to be upset, but others think I overreacted and that I should have just let it go. My parents think I should have handled the situation better, that it wasn't worth ending the friendship over something so trivial. Now I'm questioning if I went too far. I know that my food allergy is a big part of my life, but maybe I should have been more understanding about Emily's perspective. Maybe I could have just let it slide and let her stay for the rest of the visit. But at the same time, it felt like she disrespected me by not taking my needs seriously. So, AITA for kicking my friend out after she ate my special diet food without asking. Could I have handled it differently? Or was I right to set such a firm boundary? AITA for kicking my sister out after she insulted my parenting. I, 34F, have a younger sister, Kate, 28F, who has always been a bit difficult to get along with. Growing up, we had our fair share of sibling rivalry, but as we got older, things started to settle down. However, we've never been super close, and I've always felt like Kate has a tendency to make everything about herself. A little over a year ago, I became a mother for the first time. I've always wanted kids, and when I had my daughter, Emily 1, I was over the moon. Of course, being a first-time mom comes with its challenges, and I quickly realized that parenting is a lot more difficult than I ever imagined. I'm a stay-at-home mom, and my husband, Mark, 35M, works full-time. We've been adjusting to this new life, and while it's definitely overwhelming, we've found our rhythm. Emily is a happy, healthy baby, and we do our best to provide her with the best care and attention. Now, I know that Kate has never been a big fan of kids. She's always made it clear that she doesn't plan to have any of her own, and she often makes comments about how she doesn't understand why anyone would want to deal with the chaos of raising children. To each their own, right? I respect her choice, and I've never pushed her to change her mind. But what I didn't expect was for her to start criticizing my parenting decisions. It all started when Kate came to visit us for a weekend. She's been pretty vocal about not wanting to be around kids for too long, so we don't see her much, but we do try to make an effort to get together when we can. When she arrived, she immediately started making comments about Emily's nap schedule. Emily still takes 2 naps a day, and while I know that's a bit of a hassle for me as I try to plan my day around it, I also know that it's what's best for her. I explained that Emily tends to get cranky if she doesn't nap properly, and I stick to a strict schedule to help her get the rest she needs. Kate, however, wasn't impressed. She said, "It's just a nap. Let her skip it. You're spoiling her." I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe she just didn't understand, but it didn't stop there. The next day, Emily had a small temper tantrum because she was tired and hungry. As any parent knows, babies are pretty unpredictable, and sometimes they just lose it. I was doing my best to comfort her, and I tried to soothe her by offering a bottle. Kate, however, was in the room and started making sarcastic comments. "You're really giving her a bottle right now? That's such a lazy way to handle things. Maybe if you weren't so dependent on a routine, she wouldn't be acting like this." At that point, I was getting frustrated. I explained that I was doing what worked for Emily and that every child is different. I didn't expect Kate to understand what it was like to be a parent, especially not a new one, but I thought she could at least respect my choices. Kate, however, seemed to think that my approach was wrong, and she began giving unsolicited advice about how I should be handling Emily's behavior. "You're just reinforcing bad habits by giving in to her every time she cries," she said. "You should let her cry it out. She'll learn faster that way." I've heard the cry it out method before, but it's not something I'm comfortable with. Every parent has their own approach to sleep training and parenting in general, and I've chosen one that feels right for me and Emily. But Kate kept pushing. "I just think you're making her more high maintenance than she needs to be," she said. "You'll never get your life back if you keep coddling her like this." By the time the weekend was over, I was feeling completely drained. It wasn't just the comments about Emily's behavior. It was the constant undermining of my parenting decisions. I felt like I was being judged at every turn. I tried to keep my cool, but when she made another offhand comment about how I probably wouldn't be able to do anything fun ever again, I snapped. I told Kate that I didn't appreciate her constant criticism and that I was doing the best I could for Emily. I told her that she needed to respect my parenting choices and that if she couldn't do that, maybe she shouldn't visit anymore. Kate, of course, got defensive. She told me I was being too sensitive and that she was just giving advice. She claimed that she wasn't trying to offend me, but I just didn't see it that way. It wasn't advice, it was judgment, and it was making me feel like a bad mom every time she opened her mouth. I asked her to leave, and she was shocked. She said I was being dramatic and that I was overreacting. She tried to tell me that I was ruining our relationship over something as small as parenting differences, but I felt like it was more than that. I didn't want her around if she couldn't respect the choices I was making for my daughter. Since then, things have been tense between us. Kate has reached out a couple of times, but the conversations have mostly been awkward. She's told me that I'm being unfair and that I need to let go of my mom guilt. I'm honestly torn. I love my sister, but I can't keep allowing her to disrespect my decisions as a parent, especially when I'm trying my best. My husband thinks I did the right thing by setting a boundary, but our parents are disappointed in me. They say that I should have tried to work it out with Kate and that I shouldn't have kicked her out over something like this. They say that, as a family, we should be more understanding and that I should let Kate be herself. I'm feeling conflicted. Maybe I could have handled it better, but I honestly don't think I was wrong to ask her to leave when she was so critical. I just want to be respected as a mom, and I don't think that's too much to ask. So, AITA for kicking my sister out after she insulted my parenting? Could I have handled it better, or was I right to stand up for myself and my choices? AITA for telling my sister that she's not allowed to bring her kids to my house after they broke my stuff for the second time? I, 31F, don't have kids of my own, and while I adore my nieces and nephews, I've always been clear with my family that I'm not a fan of kids running wild in my home. I've always had a quiet and orderly lifestyle, and my apartment is a reflection of that. I have a lot of breakable or valuable things, and I also work from home, so I need a calm environment to focus. Over the years, I've made it clear to my siblings, especially my older sister Megan, 36F, that I don't want her kids to run amok in my space. Megan has 2 children, Luke, 7, and Ella, 5. They're great kids, and I do love spending time with them, but they can be a little rambunctious. Megan is a great mom, but she has a very laid-back parenting style. While that works for her, it's not always great in a setting like my home, where I have a lot of things that I need to keep in order. I've always asked her not to let them touch certain items or play too roughly in my apartment, but it hasn't always worked. The first time things went wrong was about a year ago. I had invited Megan and her kids over for lunch, and things started out well. But soon enough, Luke and Ella were running around, jumping on my furniture, and trying to play games with my glass coffee table as a stage. They ended up knocking over a lamp, and the shade shattered all over the floor. I wasn't furious, but I was disappointed. Megan apologized profusely, and I told her that accidents happen, but I would really appreciate it if she could keep the kids from touching certain things in the future. Megan assured me it wouldn't happen again, and I genuinely believed her. I love my niece and nephew, and I didn't want to make them feel unwelcome. But when they came over again a few months later, things didn't go much better. This time, they managed to break one of my more expensive kitchen appliances, a blender I'd gotten as a gift. I didn't even know how they'd done it, but it was clear the kids had been playing in the kitchen without supervision. Megan apologized again, but by this point, I was starting to feel frustrated. It wasn't the kids' fault entirely. Megan had to take some responsibility for not keeping them in check. I told her that I needed her to be more attentive when they were at my house, and again, she promised things would be different. However, when she asked if they could come over again recently, I was hesitant. I really didn't want to deal with any more broken things, but I didn't want to seem like the bad aunt either. So, I agreed, but I told Megan that if things got out of hand again, I would have to set some firm boundaries. When they arrived, I made it clear once more that they weren't allowed to play with certain items and that I needed them to be more careful. I thought everything was going fine until they started playing in the living room. Luke knocked over a vase I had inherited from my grandmother, and it shattered. I wasn't angry at the kids, but I was upset about the lack of attention to my requests. This was the 3rd time something valuable had been damaged in my home, and it felt like Megan wasn't taking my boundaries seriously. At this point, I'd had enough. I calmly told Megan that, moving forward, I wasn't comfortable having her kids in my house unless she could guarantee they wouldn't be allowed to break things. She was caught off guard, and at first she tried to downplay it, saying I was overreacting. But I explained that I worked hard for the things I had, and it was frustrating to see them damaged repeatedly. I told her that if she couldn't promise better behavior from her kids, I'd have to say no to any future visits. Megan got defensive, and she said I was being too harsh. She argued that kids are going to be kids, and that I needed to loosen up and let them have fun. I explained that it wasn't about having fun, but about respecting my space. I don't have kids, and my lifestyle is different. I've worked hard to create a home that's my sanctuary, and I don't think it's unreasonable to ask that my family respects that. Megan said I was making her feel unwelcome and that it was hard for her to visit without her kids. She told me that I needed to realize that she was a mom, and I should be more understanding of the chaos that comes with it. I didn't know how to respond to that. I get that being a parent is hard, but at the same time, I felt like my feelings weren't being considered. I don't expect her to leave her kids at home every time she visits, but I also don't think it's too much to ask that she ensures they're supervised and that they don't break things in my home. I don't think I was asking for something unreasonable. I've been feeling guilty ever since. I know I hurt Megan's feelings, and I didn't want to do that. I love her, and I love spending time with her, but it's becoming difficult to reconcile the fact that I can't keep my home the way I want it when she brings her kids over. On one hand, I want to be a good sister and aunt, but on the other, I need to protect my things and my space. I haven't spoken to her since that conversation, and I'm unsure if I was too harsh or if my feelings were justified. So, AITA for telling my sister that she's not allowed to bring her kids to my house after they broke my stuff for the second time. AITA for refusing to help my best friend pay off her debt after she spent the money I lent her on something frivolous. I, 30F, have been friends with Jess, 29F, for about 10 years. We've been through a lot together, and I consider her my best friend. We've always had a pretty open relationship when it comes to finances, sharing advice, offering support when one of us is struggling, and helping each other out when needed. So when Jess came to me a few months ago, saying she was in a bit of a financial bind and asking if I could lend her some money, I didn't hesitate to help her out. However, what happened after that has completely shifted my view of our friendship, and now I'm unsure if I made the right call in refusing to help her again. Jess had been struggling to keep up with her bills due to some poor financial decisions and unexpected expenses. I knew she wasn't in a great place, and she explained that she had been trying to pay off a personal loan and her credit card bills, but things kept piling up. She mentioned that she needed $1,000 to cover a gap in her payments and avoid late fees. She promised that once she got back on track, she'd pay me back as soon as possible. At the time, I didn't have an issue with lending her the money. I've always been someone who's willing to help out friends when they need it. Jess and I had supported each other through tough times in the past, and I trusted that she would use the money responsibly. We even agreed that I'd give it to her in 2 installments of $500, as that was what she said she needed to cover her immediate expenses. Fast forward 2 weeks, and I noticed Jess hadn't paid me back the first $500 installment. I wasn't overly concerned at first because we had agreed on a flexible repayment schedule, and I knew she was going through some stuff. But a few more weeks went by, and I started to feel uneasy when she still hadn't paid me back. I tried to approach the topic casually, asking her if she'd been able to make any progress on her payments, and that's when she dropped a bombshell. She confessed that instead of using the money I lent her to pay off her bills, she had actually spent on a new phone and some other random items that she didn't really need. She claimed that her old phone had broken and she couldn't live without it, so she decided to treat herself. I was honestly shocked and disappointed. I had trusted her with that money, and it felt like a slap in the face that she had used it for something frivolous. I tried to remain calm, but I asked her how she could justify spending money I lent her for necessities on something like a new phone. Jess said she understood why I was upset, but she explained that she needed the phone for work and that it was necessary for her job. She claimed that it had been a decision between buying a phone or falling behind on work, even though I knew that wasn't true because she had been managing fine with her old one. The more she talked, the more it seemed like she was trying to rationalize her decision, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she had used my money irresponsibly. After hearing this, I was really hurt. I felt like Jess didn't take our friendship or the trust one put in her seriously. I decided to sit on it for a few days to calm down before responding. But after thinking it over, I felt like I had to make it clear that this wasn't okay. So, I messaged her and told her I was upset about how she had spent the money and that it didn't sit well with me that she hadn't prioritized paying off her bills. I told her I couldn't afford to just throw away that much money and that I expected her to pay me back, but it would have to be in a way that felt more responsible. I gave her an ultimatum. Either she would pay me back immediately, or we could have a more serious conversation about what this meant for our friendship. I also let her know that I wasn't going to help her out with any more money in the future unless I saw genuine effort on her part to fix her finances. I didn't think I was being unreasonable. I just wanted her to be accountable and responsible for her actions. Her response was not what I expected. She immediately got defensive, accusing me of attacking her and not understanding how difficult her situation was. She said that she was under a lot of stress and needed some comfort, which is why she bought the phone. I get that everyone has their own way of coping with stress, but I felt like she was trying to make it my responsibility to fix her problems. She also mentioned that I was being unsupportive and that if I really cared about her, I wouldn't make such a big deal out of this. I was stunned by her reaction. I thought I was being reasonable, but she made me feel guilty for even suggesting that she should pay me back. We argued back and forth for a while, but it became clear to me that Jess wasn't taking responsibility for her actions. She didn't seem to understand why I was so upset, and she kept focusing on how hard things were for her, without acknowledging how her choices had affected me. Eventually, I decided to stop engaging in the argument. I told her that I needed some space to process everything and that I didn't want to keep going in circles. I also told her that, at this point, I wasn't sure I could continue being friends with her if she couldn't take accountability for what she'd done. It wasn't just about the money. It was about respect, trust, and boundaries. Since then, Jess has tried to reach out a few times, but I haven't responded. I feel conflicted because she's my best friend, but I also feel like I can't keep enabling her behavior. I don't think I'm asking for too much. I just want her to be responsible and respectful of my time, energy, and resources. But I also miss her, and I hate the idea of losing our friendship over something like money. So, AITA for refusing to help my best friend pay off her debt after she spent the money I lent her on something frivolous? AITA for telling my parents they aren't allowed to see my daughter after they ignore my parenting rules? I, 32F, have a 1-year-old daughter, Lily, and I've been pretty clear with my parents, 58M, 56F, about my boundaries when it comes to parenting. I love them and they adore Lily, but we've always had some differences in how we approach certain things. I've worked hard to raise Lily with a routine that works for her, and I've tried my best to communicate what I need from my family when it comes to helping me care for her. However, over the past few months, things have gotten tense between us because they've repeatedly ignored my rules and my wishes, which has led to a pretty big blow-up. From the start, I made it clear that I didn't want Lily to have any sugary snacks or treats until she was at least 2 years old. I've done a lot of research about the effects of sugar on infants and toddlers, and I've chosen to stick to this approach because I want her to develop healthy eating habits. I also don't believe in using screen time as a way to entertain her, at least not at this young age. I've been really strict about these two things, and I've told my parents about them multiple times. In the beginning, they were on board and said they understood. But as time went on, I noticed they were slipping. First, it was a little piece of cake at a family gathering that they gave her without asking me. I noticed Lily's face light up when she tasted it, and I immediately knew what had happened. I was annoyed, but I didn't want to make a scene, so I quietly asked my mom what she had given Lily. She said, "It's just a little taste." She loved it, and we thought you wouldn't mind. I calmly explained that I did mind and that I had asked them to respect my wishes when it came to Lily's diet. She apologized, and I let it go, thinking it was a one-time mistake. But then it started happening more frequently. They'd give her a cookie when I wasn't looking. They'd sneak her little bites of chocolate when I was in the other room. The worst part is they'd always act like I was overreacting when I caught them. My dad would say, "Oh, it's just a small amount. You're being too strict. She deserves to enjoy herself." Or my mom would tell me, "You're going to make her feel deprived if you keep being this strict." It became a running pattern. Every time I'd mention it, they'd tell me that I was being too uptight and that I was restricting Lily's fun. They'd point out other parents who let their kids have sugar or screen time and say, "Look at how happy they are. You're going to make Lily miss out on things." I try to have a calm conversation with them about it, reminding them that my decision wasn't about deprivation, but about creating healthy habits. I explained that I didn't want Lily to get used to sugary treats because it could lead to unhealthy eating habits down the road. I also told them that I didn't want her to get used to using screens as a way to keep her entertained. I asked them to respect my rules while she was under their care, but they didn't seem to take me seriously. It all came to a head a few weeks ago. I had arranged for Lily to spend the day at my parents' house while I had a medical appointment. I told them, again, that she couldn't have sugar or screen time, and that I would appreciate it if they could stick to her regular routine while she was there. They assured me they would respect my rules, so I left feeling somewhat at ease. When I came to pick her up later that day, Lily was sitting on the couch with a tablet in her hands, staring at a kid's show. I was shocked and immediately asked what was going on. My dad shrugged and said she was fussy, so I gave her the tablet to keep her entertained for a bit. She was crying, and this worked. I asked my mom if they had given her any sugary snacks, and she said, "We might have given her a few crackers with some frosting on them." She loved it, and we didn't think it would be a big deal. At that point, I was furious. This was the third or fourth time they had ignored my rules, and I felt like they were blatantly disregarding my wishes. I told them that they had broken my trust and that I couldn't allow them to watch Lily anymore if they couldn't respect the boundaries I'd set for her. They immediately got defensive. My dad said, "You're being way too strict. It's not like we did anything bad. She was fine." My mom said, "You need to relax. You're going to make your daughter miserable if you keep controlling everything." I tried to stay calm, but I was upset. I told them that they had made me feel like I couldn't trust them with my daughter, and that it was incredibly frustrating that they didn't respect my rules. I also explained that it wasn't just about sugar or screens. It was about them not listening to me as a mother. They weren't treating me like I was the one in charge of my child's well-being, and that hurt me. After a tense exchange, I told them that I couldn't have them around Lily if they weren't willing to respect my parenting decisions. I told them I needed a break from them, and that it might be best for them not to see her for a while until they understood how important this was to me. My mom started crying and said that I was punishing them for being grandparents. She said I was overreacting, and my dad was angry, telling me I was being unreasonable. I left their house with Lily, and since then, we've barely spoken. They've sent a few texts, but I've been ignoring them. My friends and family are divided. Some think I did the right thing by standing my ground and protecting my daughter's well-being. Others think I should have let it go and that I'm being too harsh. They believe that my parents were just trying to be loving grandparents and that I'm overreacting to a few harmless indulgences. I've been questioning if I made the right decision. I know my parents love Lily and that they want to spend time with her, but I don't feel like I can let them do so if they refuse to respect my parenting rules. I also don't want to keep having the same arguments over and over. I've tried explaining my reasons, but they just don't seem to understand where I'm coming from. So, AITA for telling my parents they aren't allowed to see my daughter after they ignore my parenting rules about sugar and screen time? Could I have handled this differently? Or was my decision justified? Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.